Hey there, boys and girls. Life is a series of changes. We all know that. Friends come and go. We change jobs, hobbies, even sometimes marriages. In this case, the change is location. Is this little town the end of the trip, or is it just an interesting interlude? I don't know. So, this is Montana, written by Alexander Hok'ee. He drove for a while, state to state, until he was about to run out of gas for the fourth time. He'd stayed at nasty little motels to save as much money as he could, so he could get as far as he could, and now he was just hitting the Montana state line, right at the edge of an end to a means. Fairview, Montana. It was nothing to look at mostly, just a line of shops and a gas station, with small houses thrown in for good measure here and there. But something about it gave him a twinge in his gut, and not one of those good twinges that end up in a boner, neither. Nope, this was a twinge that might end up being bad. You know, one of those sharp feelings that make you want to hurl, to throw up everything you've ever thought about eating for a week. Yeah, that never ends well. Securing the gas nozzle in the tank opening, he leaned his back against the truck as he listened to the whooshing and clicking while the tank filled. What the fuck was he doing? Chasing 3/4 of the way across the country after a girl? Not even knowing what he would do if he found her. I mean, would she even want him there? Would she be so far gone that she didn't know him anymore? Fuck. He grumbled under his breath and closed his eyes. Is she really worth it? Picturing her pretty little crooked smile that she would do when she looked at him, or how her eyes would have that tiny sparkle when she turned her face up to his. Remembering how she smelled, tasted, felt. Fuck. He whispered again, then opened his eyes when the pump clicked off, and he finished it off up to the 76 mark even, and recradled the hose, turning to walk up to the tiny building. Yeah, he thought, she's definitely worth it. Ding dong. The door announced his entry, and a small, elderly man looked up from a magazine he was reading. Afternoon, the man said, and Xander gave a polite nod as he grabbed a package of Twinkies from the shelf and a Dr. Pepper from the not-so-cool cooler. Mind if I leave my truck here for a bit? I was hoping to walk around town and sightsee a little. The man chuckled as he took Xander's money, then shrugged when he sat back down on his stool. Not much to see, really. For you ain't like Billings. Xander laughed and nodded. I don't suppose it is, but yeah, I'd like to see it if it's all the same. The man shrugged again, then gestured to the back of the little store. Park it around the side. That way I won't lose no business. I close at 10, so better be back by then. Don't want a strange truck on my lot all night, you know. Xander gave him another nod, then a two-fingered salute as he jogged back out to his truck and pulled it around to the side like he was told. Maybe a walk in her home state will help clear his mind, or at least get the feel of where she's from. Shit, she could be from the whole other end of the state for all he knew, but at least it's a start. Yep. Letting a slow, deep breath escape, he unwrapped one of the Twinkies and shoved it in his mouth as he fell back out of the truck and locked it up. He only had a few hours before 10, so a walk around the dinky town to get the lay of the land was needed. If anything, maybe he could find some place to stay that didn't have crime scene chalk still etched on the floor. Pulling his phone out, he sighed at the lack of messages and missed calls he had, shoved it back in his pocket and took a swig of his Dr. Pepper, then let his feet guide him. Time to take in the rustic backwoods scenery, I guess, he chuckled to himself and turned his first corner. Xander had walked for a couple of hours, just winding streets through small, quiet neighborhoods. He finally stopped to lean against a tree for a bit, just to drain the last little bit of his Dr. Pepper. As he let the last of it fall back through his throat, he replaced the lid and looked around for a wastebasket, or possibly even a personal trash bin to toss it in, just to find nothing. "New in town, young man?" came a feeble female's voice, and he spun around to see an old woman slowly rocking in her chair on the front porch of a well-manicured old home, brightly colored flowers framing it. Weird. He hadn't noticed that before. I am. Just wondering if there's any place I can hang my hat for the night." The woman smiled slightly and leaned forward, letting a long braid of silver hair fall to her front. Then she raised one arm to point a bony finger down the street. "Just down the way, we have our one and only hotel, Hotel Albert, named after our founding mayor long ago. You ask for Beatrice. She's the owner and the great-granddaughter of the original owner. She'll set you up for the night." Xander turned to look in the direction she pointed, then gave her a smile as he pushed off the tree. "Thanks," Xander said with a nod, and started off in the direction she pointed, only to stop when he heard the creak of wood, and he turned to see an empty rocking chair barely moving on the stoop. He spun himself around completely to inspect the house for a second. It looked like it hadn't been lived in years. Boarded up windows and the front door hanging slightly, with one hinge broken. "What the fuck?" he whispered, and then brought a hand up to scrub across his eyes. This was not the house he'd just looked at, definitely not where that old woman sat. Shaking his head in disbelief, he slowly took off to find this Hotel Albert, even if he was directed to it by a figment of his imagination. "I need sleep, that's all." He groaned and then started walking a little faster until he turned back down the main street he'd started on. He looked at the street name and then behind him again before turning back to see a large brick building just across from him. Okay, now that was not there a minute ago. He blinked, just staring a moment until he was knocked out of his trance by a bicycle bell ringing out. He barely had time to move out of the way as a little girl almost ran him off the sidewalk. "Watch it, mister," she yelled with a giggle. Oh, sorry." She steadied herself on her bike, and as he watched, she kept going down the street, turned the corner, and with one last ring of her bell, she rode out of sight. Where the fuck did she come from? Shaking his head again, he chuckled and turned back to look at this Hotel Albert. Well, it looks innocent enough, even if the rest of the town is whacked. He chuckled to himself and shoved his hands in his pocket to retrieve his phone. He still had a couple of hours left before he had to go back and get his truck. Maybe he could at least get a room. Then he can walk clear back across town. His thoughts paused as he looked just a couple of doors down from the hotel to see the gas station where he started this fucking Twilight Zone day. What the... He blinked and shook his head as he pushed across the street. Twilight Zone is right, man. The bell above the door dinged as he pushed it open and looked around the lobby area. It looked innocent enough. There were a couple of older cush chairs surrounding an obviously antique coffee table on one side, and to the other was a large desk donned with nothing but a logbook and a bell. No people. Taking a slow step to the desk, he looked around for a second for any signs of life before raising his hand to ring the bell. "Ring that bell and I'll lop your hand off, boy." A gruff but not unmistakably female's voice stopped him mid-ring. Just then, an older, rougher-than-rough-looking woman came out from an office behind the desk. "Oh, sorry. You want a room? Yep, I know. Otis told me. He said you'd probably be by." "Otis?" She chuckled slightly, then leaned both hands on the counter as she turned the logbook around to face him. "The gas station where you parked your truck. Didn't think the owner would give me a holler to let me know some young stranger would be darkening my doorstep?" Xander made an O gesture with his mouth and nodded. Made sense. The town was creepy, but definitely small, so why wouldn't the gas station dude let everyone know someone new was in town? Oh, okay, sorry. So, how much for the night? She stared at him for a second, then chuckled again. $39.50 a night. Xander was a little shocked at how cheap the room was, but he wasn't about to look a gift horse in the mouth. Reaching into his pocket, he tossed 2 20s on the counter and watched as she scooped them up and disappeared back into the room she came from. Then, just a few seconds later, she came back out holding a key marked 12. Thanks. He reached out to take the key, and she pulled it back, shaking her head. Sign first, then key. Okay. He glanced down at the logbook again, and she tapped a pen at the spot he was supposed to be writing his name. Taking the pen, he quickly scribbled his name down, then took hold of the key. We only have 3 rules here, young man. No visitors, no loud music, and above all, no matter what, you don't go wandering the halls after 11 p.m. Got it? He blinked at the tone in her voice, but just nodded as she finally let go of the key. Okay, good. The room is on the 3rd floor at the end of the hall. Checkout is at 10 a.m. Not a minute later, or I charge you for another night. Clear? He was a little put off by her sharp tone, but he nodded yet again, partly because he was stunned, but mostly because she quite literally scared the fuck out of him. Okay, let me go get my truck, and I'll come back and get settled into my room. He turned toward the door, then looked back at her when she grumbled under her breath something about hoodlum Navajos. I'm sorry, what? His courage came back in a flood as she glanced at him while turning to go back in her office. I said dinner's in an hour. We'll eat in the main hall if you're joining us. He raised a brow and stared her down for a second, then nodded. Sure thing, thanks. And without another word, he pocketed the key and took off out the door to go a couple of doors down to retrieve his truck. This is surely going to be a weird as fuck stay, but interesting nonetheless. Maybe with all the crazy around, they might not be too freaked out about what he was searching for, or who. Yep, there's going to be some sleuthing going on, maybe even after 11. That part about not being out after 11 had the little rebellious kid in him ready to do anything he was told not to. So, you want to know what happens? Well, you're going to have to go add Alexander Hok'ee to your circles and find out for yourselves, people. I can't do everything for you.